All right. Well, hello, good morning, good day, good afternoon to everybody who's on the call. This is Tech Talk Live, and let's see, I believe this might be episode number 48 if you're following along with the home edition. So today we have, we're lucky to have Florian Mueller with us, who is a software architect for Alfresco. And the topic is CMIS, CMIS. It's the Content Management Interoperability Services Standard. And Florian is uniquely qualified to lead this discussion because he is the project chair of the Apache Chemistry Project, which is the home of a reference implementation of the CMIS standard. He's also the technical committee member of the CMIS committee at OASIS, which is the body that governs the standard, and he's the editor of the CMIS specification itself. So I can't imagine a better person to have on the call to talk to us about CMIS. And then it almost seems silly to mention that I'm also involved in the chemistry project as a committer as well. I work on the Python API for CMIS, but just it pales in comparison to the amount of work that Florian is doing around CMIS. So he's definitely the guy for this talk. So Florian, I think I've hyped you up sufficiently, and I should turn it over to you. I think the format today is Florian has several slides that he's going to take us through, but it's broken up into chunks so that we can have a little bit of discussion in between and around each topic. Is that accurate, Florian?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to be quiet and let you talk. Just a reminder that to everyone that the session is being recorded, and you can ask questions by typing into the chat panel within WebEx, and Maxine and I will sort of facilitate and sort of moderate the questions as we go along. So I'll be quiet, and Florian, let's talk CMIS.
Thanks, Jeff. And before I start, I have to begin with a disclaimer. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff that is coming in the next Alfresco release, but nothing is finalized until it's finalized. So we think it will be in the next release, but we can't promise anything. Okay, end of disclaimer. So what I prepared for today is 5 different topics, really different topics. Most of them are talking about the next release of Alfresco and the next CMS implementation of Alfresco. But we also have a lot of time to talk about everything you are interested in. So if you have a question or if you want to share something, we have time for that after I've gone through all the prepared topics. So what I'm talking about is the Alfresco CMIS mapping, not the most exciting topic, but we get questions, so I'm repeating that. Then I'm going to talk about the CMS implementation in Alfresco 4, the next release. Then I will show you a bit how CMIS and Web Scripts look like in the next release. Then I will talk about performance tuning, and this is not Alfresco specific, this is really CMS in general. And then I give you a short outlook to the browser binding that will be defined in CMS 1.1, which talks JSON. Okay, let's start with the first one. I just want to go quickly over this because it's actually really boring. So what's mapped to CMIS? All documents that are derived from CM content are mapped to CMIS types. The CMIS type ID starts with D:, and we once in a while get the question, why is that? The CMIS specification defines that each type in CMIS has to have a unique type ID, and in Alfresco it's actually possible to name a document type and an association with the same name, and so we need a way to distinguish them. So documents are prefixed with D:. The query name is exactly the Alfresco type name. There's one exception to the rule. CM content is mapped to CMS document, which is the base document type in CMS. For folders, it's basically the same. All types that are derived from CM folder are exposed through CMS. The prefix here is F:, and the exception to the rule is that CM folder is mapped to CMS folder. Relationships. All peer-to-peer relationships, all peer-to-peer associations in Alfresco are mapped to CMS relationships. Child relationships are not mapped. The contains relationships is mapped as the folder hierarchy. Relationship types start with R:. So there's a CMS query name for relationship, but it doesn't really matter because it's not possible to query relationships in Alfresco. We of course have a base type CMS relationship which has no Alfresco equivalent. So if you create a relationship, you have to use one of the subtypes. What's sometimes confusing is that although all relationships, all peer-to-peer relationships are exposed, some relationships doesn't seem to be visible. The reason is that we only expose relationships where the source and the target types are actually CMIS types. So if you have a relationship or an association that points to an object that is not mapped to CMIS, the whole relationship will not be visible. Policies, we had to find a way to map the aspect types into the CMIS model, and they are neither document nor folder types, so we use the policy types for that. They are prefixed with P:, so P stands for policy, not for aspect. The CMS base type of course exists, but is also abstract, so there's no Alfresco equivalent, so you cannot assign an aspect CMS policy to an object. That doesn't work. So in general, everything that's outside CM content on CM folder is not mapped to CMIS. There's a wiki page where you can read that again and even more and all the details. And that's all I wanted to say about the Alfresco CMS mapping. Are there any questions regarding this or insights?
One thing, Florian, that I want to point out is when you define your custom content model, or if you extend the out-of-the-box Alfresco types, there's nothing that you have to do further in order to have those types and aspects exposed to CMIS. That happens magically for you. So there's no like mapping or properties or anything like that, or any config that you have to do to make that happen. You just define your model once, and it shows up, it gets exposed to CMIS.
Yeah, it's all magic.
Yep. Okay, I don't see any questions popping in here, so why don't we keep going, and if someone has a question, then we'll come back to it when we get a chance. Although one is just coming in that says, can you get to the WCM repository through the CMIS server? And I will just clarify that a little bit and say you're probably talking about the AVM repository, and you're wondering if you can get to that through CMIS services. So,
and the answer is no, AVM is not mapped to CMIS.
Right, so if you're doing anything with CMIS, you need to be using the DM repo, which is, I mean, the DM repo is really what people should be focusing on anyway, but yeah, definitely not mapped to, AVM is not mapped to CMIS. All right, we ready to go on to the next topic?
Okay. The next one is Alfresco 4, so we are going to change a lot of stuff under the hood. So we have implemented the CMIS server implementation from scratch, this time using the Apache Chemistry Open CMIS framework. So why are we doing that? The first reason is so Open CMIS is now used by several CMIS repositories, so it's not just us. and all the all bug fixes, improvements, and whatever is not working or whatever can be improved around this framework, we will benefit from it if you use it. So this was a pretty simple sale within Alfresco. It makes sense that we get all these experiences and all these improvements from the Apache project into Alfresco. Another reason is that at the moment we have basically 2 CMIS implementations in Alfresco, which share a bit of code but not enough. So we have one implementation that covers the pubs binding and the other that covers the web services binding. With the Open CMIS framework, we just get one implementation that covers all bindings, and this includes also the browser binding that comes with CMS 1.1. So the idea is we just have to update the Open CMIS framework in Alfresco, and we magically get the browser binding without writing any extra code for that. Another thing is the Open CMIS framework is a bit more spec compliant than the current implementation. You probably haven't noticed that, but there are some edge cases where the current Alfresco implementation doesn't comply with the specification, and we're going to change that with the server framework. And the Open CMIS server framework is built for performance and efficient memory consumption and stuff like that. So we see a better performance, we see a less memory consumption, and we can deal with bigger documents. But how does this affect CMS clients? Well, there will be new URLs. So if you have an application right now that talks to Alfresco CMIS, you might want to change the URL. The old implementation is still there. The old URLs are still working, but they are deprecated. So we are not going to fix any bugs or something like that anymore. We are focusing completely at the new implementation, and at some point the old implementation will go away. Does this make any difference to clients? If you have a generic specification compliant client, you don't see any difference. It's just another CMS implementation. So there's nothing you have to do on the client side. If you have used Aspects and the Alfresco Open CMIS extension in the past, no change here either. It's exactly the same behavior. Nothing has changed. There's one exception to the rule. If you're trying to be clever and you make any assumption about the format of the object ID, which you shouldn't, because the CMS spec says this is an opaque string, but if you have, then there is a change, and I will explain this change on the next 2 slides. The current CMS object IDs in Alfresco 3 look like this. So the current version is the node ref, and the versions are the node ref plus a semicolon and the version label. So why is this a problem? So if you create a new version, for example, if you check out this document and check it in again, what happens is that the new version gets the old object ID because that's the new document that's behind the original node ref, and the old current version, which hasn't had a version label attached to its object ID, gets a version label. So that's not spec compliant. That's why we are changing it. So if you relied on the fact that the CMS object ID was the node ref, then you have to change your code. So the new version will look like that. All version object IDs that belong to a document will have the node ref plus a semicolon plus version label. That means if you create a new version, this will change the object ID of the document. Okay, a very, very short overview about the new implementation in Alfresco 4. Do we have any questions regarding this topic?
So Florian, one question has come in. It's not related to the new implementation in 4. It's a more general question about can we federate other CMIS servers, CMIS compliant servers through Alfresco? And I'll take a stab at that, and you can elaborate on it. But I mean, basically, you know, we expose ourselves as a CMIS server, and we don't. If you're at the client level, if you want to be operating against multiple CMIS servers, then you can do that in your client. But we don't do anything to facilitate that for you. But Florian, do you want to elaborate? Or?
Well, yeah, if you're looking at the UI side of things, and there's actually another topic where I talk about the CMIS Web Scripts, where you can do some federation within the Alfresco server, but maybe we should wait for this topic, and then I can add a bit more, a few more details around that.
Okay.
Good.
We have another question from Steve. He's asking, does the create document command do a base 64 encoding on the content stream and put it in the Atom Pub message, or does it send the content separately from the Atom Pub message?
Well, it's still the base 64 encoded string in Atom Pub. The main difference is that it's now streamed. So that is, if you have a client like the OpenCMIS client, then the document is encoded into base 64 in chunks and then sent over to the server. And the OpenCMIS server decodes it while it's streaming. So it's not stored in main memory, neither on the client nor on the server.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the things we changed, and that makes it possible to actually handle really, really large documents. So we have tested it with up to 1 gigabyte without any problems.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. All right. Well, let's go on to the next topic.
Okay. Web scripts. Here we are. So with in Alfresco 4, we have the OpenCMIS client embedded and available to web scripts, and you can do a lot of fancy stuff with it. For example, it's possible to write your own share dashlet that, for example, lets you browse your SharePoint server that's somewhere, or you can synchronize your documents with other repositories like an FileNet repository or an OpenText repository or whatever. You can push out documents to a server that speaks CMS, and a lot of other things you can do, but you have to implement the stuff yourself. The only thing we provide to you is a new JavaScript top-level object called CMIS. And this CMIS object manages connections to CMS servers. We have 3 types of connections. One is the current server itself. This connection actually uses the OpenCMIS local binding. So you know there are 2 bindings defined in the CMIS specification, the Atom Pub and the web services binding, which are both going over network and shifting XML back and forth. OpenCMIS has a 3rd binding that we call the local binding. So if you have an OpenCMIS server and an OpenCMIS client in the same virtual machine, they can directly talk to each other, and that's what we are using here. So we have the current Alfresco server you can talk to. We have pre-configured connections, so there's a new XML configuration file where you can set up connection details, and a web script can reuse them, or you can configure a connection yourself within your web script. And I have here 4 lines of code that demonstrate how this could look like. So you see the CMS object over here, and you ask it for a connection, and this my connection ID would be, for example, the connection ID you configured in the configuration file. And it returns a connection object which has a few information about the connection itself, but more importantly, it has the OpenCMIS session. And from that point on, you're an OpenCMIS client, and you can do whatever OpenCMIS allows you to do. And in this case, I just get the root folder, and I get the children of the root folder, and I hand it over to my my pre-marker template, and I can do stuff with it. and I'm going to show you that now. That's the wrong one. Oh. Here we are. So this is this page is driven by a web script. The web script is about 30 lines long. The pre-marker template about 50 lines. So it's very, very easy to understand. And we actually ship this with Alfresco 4 as a demo web script. So what I can do is pretty simple but powerful. You can actually browse. You can get content. You can go up again. You see we have support for thumbnails and stuff like that. And this web script now is talking to an Alfresco server, but it could also talk to a SharePoint server and whatever. So if you remember, these are 30 lines of JavaScript code. Put this into a dashlet, put it into Share, and you can build your federating scenarios with that. We also are going to ship something that's a little bit more complex. It's basically the same idea. We have a browser here. It's browsing an Alfresco repository again, but I can, for example, click on it, can see all the properties, can actually delete it, I can view the content, I can get information about the repository, I can query the repository. So this is all web scripts. There's no Java code involved. It's all web scripts and free marker template.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're shipping those as demo web scripts. I think that's awesome. So Denis, and I'm assuming that you say your name Denis. If it's Dennis, I'm sorry. I apologize. But Denis, does that sort of address what you were thinking on federation? And if you would like to, we could unmute your line, and you could talk more about that. So give us a chat if you want to, in the chat window, say something if you want to talk about it. Or if you don't, that's fine, and we can move on. I'll wait a second to get a response here from Denis. Okay, we'll come back to Denis. If you decide that you want to talk further and have a discussion about federation using CMIS within the product, then just raise your hand or send us a chat or something, and we'll make that happen. So, Florian, I mean, those I may have missed this part, but you're using the local binding for all the communication, so you don't even have to choose between the web services binding or the Atom Pub binding. But if you had Share on a different machine than the repo, then you would have to pick between the two, right?
Yes and no. Well, Share is actually an extra case. So if you have Share running on one server and Alfresco on another, it actually automatically connects you to the Alfresco server. So if you remember, I have here my get connection call. So if I remove this my connection ID, and I'm on an Alfresco server, I get a connection to my local machine. If I'm in an Alfresco Share environment and my Alfresco server is on a different machine, this will automatically connect you to this repository. It will, under the hood, will use the Atom Pub binding because it's faster than the web services binding. But it will also take the authentication with it. So the user that is authenticated in Share will be used for this connection.
That's cool. So
without you doing anything, this happens under the hood. You can, of course, if you like, create a new, for example, a pre-configured connection to the same server and do whatever you like. You can choose another user you want to connect as. You can use the web services binding, whatever you want to do. But out of the box, we have a default connection that does it for you.
Is that config handled in the same way that sort of the Surf framework configures remote endpoints?
Yes, it's basically the same. There's another XML file for CMIS connections now.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. All right. I don't see. Do we have any new questions, Max? Okay. Well, let's keep right on going then.
Moving forward. Performance tuning. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and this is actually not related to Alfresco at all. That works for all CMS implementations. So what CMIS, if you look at it at the lower level, it's XML over HTTP over a network. That can be slow. So if you can avoid CMS calls, avoid it. Caching is your friend. OpenCMIS and .CMIS have a first level caching built in. Get familiar with it. Look at what is called an operation context. It will cache for you objects, types, repository infos, all those kinds of things. And it makes a huge difference. In addition to that, you should think about application-specific caching. So we have seen cases where people built a web page and pulled out the version history for the same document 3 times to build one page. That must be slow, right? So look what you have to do. Do the operation once, cache it for a request or for a time, and then use your cache data. Also, make sure that you are familiar with the CMIS spec. So the same scenario where somebody wants to get the latest version of a document, and instead of using get object of latest version, this guy used the version history and retrieved the whole version history all the time just to get the first entry in the list. These are things that we cannot handle in Alfresco and that we cannot handle in OpenCMIS because we don't know what you want to do. Okay, so that's performance tuning number 1. The second one is similar. Be really careful what you ask for. Ask only for the properties you really need, because calculating the property values can be an expensive thing. There are some properties that are pretty straightforward, like the object ID or an object name, but other properties like, for example, the information if this is the latest version or if this is the latest major version are really expensive because we have to pull out the version history to check if that's the case. So make sure that you only really ask for the properties you need in your application. And if you use OpenCMIS or .CMIS, they will by default pull everything. So again, make yourself familiar with the operation context. Make sure that you have a sensible filter, a property filter that only selects the stuff you need. The same is true for queries. Select star is a really bad pattern. Make sure that you in the select part select only the properties you need. The same is true for allowable actions, ACLs, relationships, and renditions. Only get the stuff you need. Allowable actions are probably the most problematic ones because OpenCMIS will fetch them automatically if you don't do anything. And allowable actions can be actually very, very painful because there are some allowable actions where we need, of course, the node information itself. Then we need the permissions of the node, and we need the version history of the node to actually calculate the value, the true or false value. And this is expensive. When I'm talking about expensive, I'm talking about a fraction of a millisecond to a millisecond, maybe 2. That doesn't sound much, but if you think about get children call, where you get all the children of a folder and you have 1,000 children in this folder, a millisecond each adds up to a second, and a second can be a lot if you have an interactive application. So really make sure that you only select what you need. Pretty similar is the page sizes and depth. So we had cases where people pulled out several hundred megabytes of XML data out of Alfresco, and then we're complaining that it's slow. What they did was they just got the whole folder tree of a big Alfresco repository. If you don't need it, don't fetch it. Page sizes are the same thing. So if you have just 10 objects on your web page that you want to display, only get 10. There's no point in getting 1,000. On the other hand, if you know that you need all children or all hits of a query, make sure that your page size is really, really big. Otherwise, it will be split up in multiple calls, which is more expensive. Okay. The next topic, next performance tip is, well, that sounds silly, but it makes a huge difference. It's HTTP keep alive. So if you look at high-level requests, they usually boil down to a burst of CMIS requests, 3, 4, 5, 6 requests in a row. With HTTP keep alive on, these requests can actually reuse the TCP connection, and that makes a huge difference. The worst thing I've seen is that if keep alive is not turned on, that each connection adds another 600 milliseconds. So and if you have a high-level request that boils down to 5 CMS requests, and each CMS request has a 600 milliseconds overhead, you end up with 3 seconds for nothing. So make sure that you have HTTP keep alive turned on. So if you're connecting to a Tomcat server directly, that's not an issue because keep alive is turned on by default. But if you put an Apache server as a front-end server in front of Tomcat, there are some configurations where HTTP keep alive is not turned on by default, and then you see a really bad performance. Similar to that is if you request a content stream, make sure that you read it and that you close it. Otherwise, the HTTP keep alive idea doesn't work. You have dangling connections that will be closed after a while, but are dangling and they don't help you with keep alive. So the client has to open a new connection to actually actually do the next request. Okay, that's the thing about HTTP keep alive. And the last tip is compression. The CMX XML compresses very, very well. Usually you can get 85 to 5% of the original size, so that's quite a lot. So if the network bandwidth is a bottleneck, compression can actually make a huge difference. So we have a wiki page how you can enable compression on the Alfresco server, but you also have to enable it on the client side. And for OpenCMIS and .CMIS, you can do this with a session parameter. Just turn compression on. Okay, just 4 random performance-related tips. Do we have any questions around this one?
So this one isn't specific to performance, but maybe someone will pop a performance question in while we're talking about this one, which is that Will is saying, sometimes you're using different usernames and things like that to connect to CMIS servers, and is there a secure way to store usernames and passwords that you may be using with other CMIS servers? Is there anything provided by Alfresco that people can leverage, or is that just something they have to handle in their own client coding, or what are your thoughts around that?
There's nothing provided by Alfresco or by OpenCMIS. You have to handle this on your own at this point in time.
Isn't there, in the early days of Surf, and I don't know if it's still in there or not, there was like a credential vault kind of?
Yes, there is, but it's not used for CMIS.
Yeah.
So for CMIS, you have to, well, if you have this pre-configured configuration where you set up everything in your XML file, what you can do is you can provide a partial setup so that you put in the server URL and all the connection parameters, but don't provide any credentials, and then add the credentials at the point in time when you connect. What you're doing with the credentials at this point is up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, of course, use the credential vault to store the credentials there and then add them at this point.
Right. Okay. I've never even poked around on that credential vault thing, so I'm not really sure how well it works or if it works. All right. So here's something somebody is pointing out. This is not a performance question, but Steve is saying that when he runs the create document command, it throws a CMIS runtime exception instead of a duplicate exception whenever a node already exists with that same name. And yeah, I've seen that same thing, right, Steve? So like I think you see a 500 or something instead of a duplicate node exception. So is that is that what we mean to have happen, Florian?
No, well, that's one of the bugs that we are going to erase by using the new implementation. Yeah, there's other things like that, especially the error handling is not 100% correct in the current CMS implementation. So it throws exception when it should be, but those exceptions either are not the right ones or don't have enough information to actually find out from a client perspective what's wrong.
Right.
And this will change with the new implementation. So the new implementation will have error messages that are human readable. It will have the stack trace from the server included, and it will throw the exceptions that should be thrown as the spec defines it. So these are all the small things that we are going to address with the new implementation.
Speaking of the new implementation, so a lot of your slides say 4.x, and so should I assume that these will be in our very next release, which is codenamed Swift, which a lot of people have probably heard, or is your 4.x giving you an out in case you decide to release it later? So maybe not in the exact next release, but maybe a point release after that.
No, it will actually be in the next release. It's actually already in head. So if you check out head today and play with it, you'll find it there.
Okay, great. That's awesome. All right. Was that your last section, or did you have
I actually have one more. Okay. The exciting bit.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so CMIS 1.1 will introduce a third binding. It's called the browser binding. The idea is to have a binding that is optimized for web browsers or for applications running in a web browser. Web services and AtomPub are not really usable in a web browser environment. So what we are going to do is introduce a binding based on JSON that can directly, a browser application can directly talk to a repository without any server-side client component. There's no translator between the web application and the CMS repository required, and we have all the security and authentication things that work in browsers and not things that only work on the server side. This binding will probably more efficient than the web services and AtomPub binding. And my personal prediction is that at some point this binding will be the standard binding, will be the binding that everybody uses because it's just faster and nicer to use and produces smaller content to transfer. So this browser binding is currently under development in the CMIS technical committee, but there's already a prototype implementation in Apache Chemistry Open CMIS. This implementation actually works with CMS 1.0, so there's no need to wait for 1.1, so we can actually implement it right now. It will be shipped with Alfresco 4, so if you want to play with it, you can. But it's deactivated by default as long as we don't have a full implementation in Apache Chemistry. We don't want to make it. We don't want to turn it on by default because it's not enough tested and stuff. So there's actually an online demo, and I'm going to show you a few things to give you an idea how it looks like. So this is CMIS where you can play with the latest CMIS implementation. Actually, you see here we have the new implementation already available, and we have the repository, the JSON repository here. So for all of you who are familiar with CMIS, this is repository info in JSON. That's what it probably will look like, and we have a new thing called root URL. If I click on that, this will take a moment because my Firefox plugin has to translate the JSON in something that's readable. So what I'm basically getting here is the root folder with all its documents and folders and properties. And as I said before, if you don't do anything, it will return everything. You see that there's quite a lot of data coming over. So what I'm going to do next is I'm restricting that by adding a filter. Filter is, and I only want the object ID and the CMIS name. Do that. And this takes again a while. And now I have the same list of children, but only with where I selected the name and the object ID, and the current implementation also returns by default the object type ID and the base ID, but you get the idea, so you can easily filter that down. So let's find an object. I know there's a JPEG over here, so that's the name of one of the documents that is in the root folder. So I remove that and add the name, or as a path of the document, which is in this case, because it's a root folder, the name of the file. So now we see the JPEG here, and if you don't want to see the actual content but the object instead, I can do this as well. I select the object, and here are my properties of the object. You see, it's pretty straightforward to build up URLs and to get all the data in JSON and not on an XML. Another thing I can show you is query. So selector. So I want to do a query. My query string is, I think I prepared something, yeah. So let's remove this for a moment. So what I'm selecting here is select CMIS object ID and name. So I only want the name and the object ID again from document. What I get is the result as JSON, and I can also limit that to the first 3 in my list. So I can add here, add max items 3. So now I've got only 3 query results. So all I want to show you is that this is what's coming. It's JSON, it's easy to use, and it's there's a prototype implementation available in Alfresco 4.
So how long do you think it'll be? And I know this is hard to predict just because of the 1.1 CMIS spec has to be approved and whatnot, but how long until we see the production-ready implementation of the browser binding in Alfresco?
Well, about 50% of the implementation is done. The framework, most of all read-only operations are implemented. What's missing in chemistry at the moment are most of the update and write operations. So you can actually create in documents and folders, and you can delete an object, but that's basically it at the moment. So implementing that is not that difficult. It just takes a bit of time. it's hard to predict when this will be done. Probably soon. The specification is in an almost ready state. So there are a few things we have to still to discuss, but the specification has been discussed since I think autumn last year. So I don't expect any bigger changes. I think it will be production ready by the end of the year, but it will not be a specification by the end of the year. So we will not have CMIS 1.1 as a specification, but we will see the first implementations supporting this without having a specification.
Yeah. And just in case, I know a lot of the stuff that Florian has been showing, he is saying is coming in 4, which if you've been around the Alfresco community, that code name for that is Swift. And our plan right now, in case you're curious, is to release Swift to the community at the end of September, and then it would be released to enterprise towards the end of the year. So if you're thinking about time frames for this stuff, the community version could be end of September. But as Florian pointed out, a lot of this is already in head. So if you're comfortable working with your own sort of daily builds or whatever, then you can see a lot of this already in head today.
Yeah, or on cmisalfresco.com. So if you just want to have a look at it, you don't have to get head and to install it and play with it. You can do it right online. cmisalfresco.com is updated basically every week with the latest head release. So it might be offline for an hour or two when we update it. But other than that, it should be available and you can play with it.
You know, back on this, the browser binding, I think I've already expressed my feeling on it on the Apache list, but I mean, just the calling it browser binding just seems so limited. It's the JSON binding is what it is. I don't know why we have browser binding, but
yeah, the name is a bit unfortunate. The original idea was to have binding that works in browsers, so you can write JavaScript applications with it. The binding itself can do a lot of more things. As I said, I think it will become the standard binding because it's better, more efficient than the other two.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm sitting here looking at that and thinking about you know, refactoring, you know, the refactoring that we could do on the Python client API based on that. But so we have another question. Is somebody's asking if the CMIS root object in Web Scripts use Atom Pub or the JSON binding under the hood, and can that be controlled? And I think we talked about that earlier, which is that by default, the CMIS root object uses the local binding when you're on the same server as Alfresco, but you can control, if you wanted to use either the Atom Pub binding or the Web Services binding, you could do that with some configuration.
Yes. Just a matter of configuration. It's just changing the configuration file a bit, and then you can basically do everything you can do with OpenCMIS in this environment as well.
I imagine when the browser binding is production ready, then I imagine we would be switching over. Well, I don't know if we'd switch over to it because we would use the local binding, but
right.
At least have that as another option for people.
Yes. Well, when it is in OpenCMIS, we just exchange the jar files, the OpenCMIS jar files, and then we have all the things that OpenCMIS provides in Alfresco. That's the nice thing about the whole Apache project thing, and then we adapt it in Alfresco. We only have, if there's something new in chemistry, we just take it, plug it in, and it works.
Right, exactly.
On the server and on the client side.
So somebody is asking about the 4X roadmap, and that is already out there on the wiki. It was updated within the last few weeks. So if you're interested in the Alfresco or the Alfresco Swift roadmap, you can definitely find that on the wiki. And for the person that asked that question, Max and I will go grab that page and link it to you real quick, because we should be able to get to it pretty quick. So, and maybe we'll, maybe we could put that in the chat so that everyone can see it and get to it easily. Also, while I'm waiting for another question, I should, Florian has already shown us CMIS.alfresco.com, and that's a great resource, not only for just seeing a working CMIS repository and playing around with the browser-based user interface, but there's also links to the spec and other tools. So definitely check out CMIS.alfresco.com. Also, what you're listening to is Tech Talk Live, which is something that we do on the first Wednesday of every month. So next month, that falls on the 7th of September, and we have not completely nailed down the topic for that day, but we think it might be around content transformers and metadata extractors. So if you're interested in how those work or looking to add custom examples of those, then you know, be sure to tune in on September 7th at the same time for that session. And I think we might have Mike Hatfield, but I don't know. We'll have an engineer from the engineering team join us for that call. Not exactly sure who yet. So anyway, definitely join us. Max, thank you for sharing the wiki page, which is the roadmap. The 2011 roadmap is that? Let me just. Yeah, that's got the Swift stuff on there. Okay, good. Awesome. So that's out there. So please click on the roadmap and check it out. And I'm getting pretty excited. I know a lot of people are getting excited about Project Swift. I should also, it just occurred to me, I should be plugging DevCon because I'm looking at Maxine and laughing just because it's such an obvious thing, and I don't always think about things like that. But DevCon will be, and this is a bit of a news flash, isn't it? We're officially announcing the dates and cities tomorrow, but since you guys have spent some time with us, we'll give you this little tidbit right now as an insider's secret. So just pleased to announce that in November, which is the 9th and 10th, we will be in London. DevCon will be in London this year, November 9th and 10th, and that'll be our EMEA DevCon event. And then in San Diego, we will have our Americas DevCon, and that's October 26th and 27th. And if you are if you're new to Alfresco, then you can come to either event the day before and join us for Jumpstart training and Advanced Alfresco, and then you know, make a day of training of it, and then you can enjoy the rest of the conference as we dive down into the internals of Alfresco with the engineering team. So this will be our second year we've done DevCon. Last year was awesome, and this year should be great too. So we will have links to more information on DevCon and things like that come out tomorrow morning. But just to let you guys know, that's what's happening. So definitely get excited about that. Start working on your email to your boss that explains why it would be such an awesome conference for you to go to. So do we, we should definitely have some CMIS sessions at DevCon. I'm sure we will. I mean, CMIS is very strategic to Alfresco, and it's an important standard, and it's also, you know, as you can see, we know we're investing a lot in it with Florian and a lot of other people that are involved with the Apache project and Oasis and things like that. So, anyway, I don't see any other questions. So, Florian, do you want to add any closing thoughts or any topics? Yes?
No, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Just wanted to thank you that you joined the call and listened to all the different topics we had. I think there was a bunch of very, very different things I went through.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool, and you know, I should say that On the Open CMIS project, there's some documentation that has been written that might be good. Some of the stuff that we've gone into is pretty detailed, but if you're looking for examples and code snippets and things like that, you should definitely go to the Apache Chemistry homepage and check that out. I'd also say that, speaking for the Python client, if you are a Python developer and you're interested in CMIS, definitely get involved. And this goes for all of chemistry, really. I think you would agree, Florian, that we're looking for people to collaborate with. So if you want to help by writing documentation, if you want to help by troubleshooting, finding bugs, resolving bugs, adding new functionality, it's a community project, and we're always looking for developers and people with other skill sets to help out and get involved in this stuff. So definitely join in if you're interested and want to help out. All right. Well, I think we'll close out the call. This was another cool tech talk, and I really appreciate all the time that you guys have spent with us this morning, and I look forward to talking to you again on September 7th. All right. Goodbye.